Hi, my name is David Howe. I'm the president of SubscriberWise and the credit manager of Maslin Cable, where I've been employed for the past 15 years. Today I'm going to talk about my dual roles as the president of the largest issuing credit reporting agency for the communications industry, but also as an end user of permissible purpose consumer credit information from the standpoint of credit manager here at Maslin Cable TV. I'm going to focus first on permissible purpose use of consumer credit and how SubscriberWise credentials member operators from a compliance standpoint that actually exceeds the requirements of the FCRA. We'll then learn how end users, my colleagues here at Maslin Cable, namely CSRs, leverage consumer information specifically consistent with Section 604 of the FCRA. Finally, we'll see how SubscriberWise obtains data for analysis for purposes of retrospective analysis, model calibration, and other situations following customer needs and inquiries. Now, when we're talking about permissible purpose use of consumer credit information, we have to understand that every member operator of SubscriberWise is a cable or telecommunications operator. And in order to access consumer credit information, there's a vetting process. One of the things that we have to do is have our member operators state the purpose for accessing consumer credit information. And it's certainly true, it's very obvious that cable operators are defined as credit grantors in this country, similarly to the way banks are. Although we're not lending cash over the counter, our service and equipment is at risk of exposure, non-payment, unreturned equipment, etc. That's why the federal government says, yes, unequivocally, we are credit grantors. So the client is a cable operator and has a permissible purpose for obtaining consumer reports in accordance with the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And specifically, these two reasons apply for our industry. In connection with a credit transaction involving the consumer on whom the information is to be furnished and involving the extension of credit to or review or collection of an account of the customer, or for a legitimate business need in connection with a business transaction that is initiated by the consumer. So those are the required terms for accessing permissible purpose consumer credit reports for our member operators. Now, SubscriberWise certainly meets all the compliance guidelines. We help our operators achieve that. And once they achieve that, we actually have a substantial training protocol that includes training the CSRs, the individuals on the front line accessing this information. When we return data to CSRs, we only return decision levels. We don't actually return any of the consumer's information, including their social security number. We do not return FICO scores, collection activity, etc. So again, we far exceed what any of the bureaus, the national repositories, are currently doing. Even when we deliver our analytics through APIs, we don't return any consumer credit information to third-party billing systems, unlike the repositories. They are actually returning things like credit scores, numbers of collections, other components of the actual credit report. SubscriberWise omits all of that. In our training, as you can see, one of the things that we focus on is the permissible purpose and FCRA use of consumer reports from the standpoint of the CSR. Here's an example of how CSRs communicate that permissible purpose directly with the prospective customer.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, let's go then with the basic cable and the internet, please.
Okay. To schedule an appointment, I would need to run a credit check.
Okay.
To run the credit check, I will need your date of birth.
3
March.
Yes, sir.
Social security number.
2.
Phone number, please.
Area code 330 4.
And this is a credit check. That's going to be okay?
Yes.
Looks good. No deposit is required. How many TVs?
Now, I always enjoy hearing the CSRs communicate our best practices so effectively. And as a courtesy, we always tell the consumer that we're going to obtain information, a consumer credit report. And of course, as you may well know, because we have permissible purpose, in every state except one in this country, we're not even required to inform the individual that we're going to obtain this information. So we certainly are in compliance with the permissible purpose and the scope of the FCRA. We actually exceed those requirements very, very nicely. So now that we've established and demonstrated cable operators are using information, consumer reports, consistent with the federal laws, and training protocols have been established, customers are informed, what we want to do next is examine how SubscriberWise makes sense of all of the information. We have data on more than 300,000 consumers from all over the country, and our operators rely on the information so that we can help them make sense of the analytics that we're going to provide them. One thing we want to mention here is that a consumer report is defined as a report that falls under the permissible purpose, etc. But effectively it requires a consumer's name to be attached to that report. It's actually difficult to find definitions of exclusions of consumer reports from the FCRA because it's effectively common sense. In the absence of a consumer's name, it's really not a consumer report. However, we did locate one particular exclusion, a letter that is contained on the FTC's website, and the question is regarding Section 603 of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And to get right to the point, the attorney for this piece makes the conclusion that the term consumer report does not include any report containing information solely as to transactions or experiences between the consumer and the person. In other words, in the absence of that person's name, the number of collections, the age of the credit file, any non-personal identifying information, the absence of that, it's not a consumer report. So we want to clear that point up. But how does SubscriberWise use information that it obtains from the consumer report for this retrospective analysis? And also, why do we do it? Well, the question of why might be answered by looking at an email from a member operator. The question is it possible for us to either have a report generated for us or have access to generate a report on a regular basis for us to measure the use of this product? Do you have that level of detail available? The answer, of course, is yes, we do. And we are very happy to provide that analysis for our members so that they can use the product with good information, with knowledge. So how would I, as the president of SubscriberWise, who's going to either do a model calibration or a retrospective analysis or make economic news for the country regarding FICO scores, for example, I can log into the system and we have a function in the report viewer, and I'm going to use Maslin Cable for this demonstration. We're going to select custom time frame. It's a text export, but because we're doing a data analysis here, in other words, because we're not going to use a consumer report, we're simply going to use transactions, if you will, or other key information, non-personal identifiable information from the consumer report. We select the data analysis feature. And let's just use January 1st, 2010 through December 31st, 2011. Submit the query. We'll save the file. We'll call this MCTV previous year. Our file's been downloaded. We need to open Excel. We want to import this data on my desktop, and we need MCTV previous year. Here's our file. This is a comma delimited file. And now we have the data. It's data that incorporates information from the consumer report. It's also data that's taken from SubscriberWise directly that is not part of a consumer report. We also have a date of birth that's obtained directly from the consumer, again, not from a consumer report. But as you see, there's absolutely no identifiable information. Again, this is not a consumer report. This is simply raw data. And why do we need this data? Well, let me demonstrate an example of how I might want to calculate an average FICO score for Maslin Cable. What we'll do is scroll down. We'll find the FICO scores. And very quickly we can calculate an average FICO score. In this case it's a 629. If I need additional, more granular detail, I can go into a pivot table and from the field list we'll select the decision levels. SubscriberWise segments subscribers into risk and selling categories based on FICO scores, based on collections, based on past due balances, based on many multidimensional factors. We actually have 8 levels where we identify higher risk, and then we decision as qualified, well, and very well qualified, where operators can generate marketing and upsell offers because these individuals who segment into those levels are very reliable. Now I can use a formula in this cell to quickly understand the segmentation for this member operator. We'll format the cells by percentage. And it's very interesting, and this of course is one of the reasons why SubscriberWise must analyze data, because when we go around to operators anywhere in this country and they ask, what percent of my customers are going to be high risk, or what percent of my customers are going to have a credit file but not generate a credit score, we can answer that with extreme reliability and consistency. For example, a level 3 with our technology represents a consumer who has a credit file with the repository. That file is at least 1 year old, but that file does not generate a credit score because of an absence of active use trade lines. In addition, though, the consumer has no additional adverse information. There's no collection activity, and there are no past due balances. And I can tell you that anywhere in the United States of America, anyone who is selling cable will have 2% of their prospects that decision with that kind of segmentation. In other words, a 1+ year old credit file, 1 or more years, and no adverse information. I can tell an operator that level 6, level 7, and level 8 collectively represent 50% of their submissions. Level 6, 7, and 8 from a FICO standpoint represent the bottom 25% of the credit consuming population. That's credit scores up to 599. That's very important information to have and to know. I appreciate your time. If you have any questions, please contact me directly.